The room applauded like the ending was already signed. My brother stood tall, declaring all 8 beach properties were naturally his. Mom wept with pride while Dad nodded his approval. They waited for my usual silence. But instead, I smiled and dragged my suitcase to the center of the rug. I looked my father in the eye and asked, "Dad, don't you know?" The silence hit so hard, I heard the ice settle in a glass. My name is Natalie Fox, and for the last 2 hours, I had been watching my family celebrate my erasure. The air conditioning in my parents' sprawling Charleston home was working overtime, humming a low, desperate vibration against the stifling South Carolina humidity pressing against the windows. But it did little to cool the feverish excitement in the living room. It was not officially a party. My mother, Diane, would have corrected anyone who called it that. She would have called it a family meeting, or perhaps a strategy session for the future. But there was shrimp cocktail on the sideboard, a case of expensive Pinot Noir breathing on the counter, and a palpable sense of victory that usually only accompanies the winning of a lottery or a rigged election. The occasion was the informal, yet theatrically serious, distribution of the family assets, specifically, the 8 rental properties scattered across Folly Beach and the Isle of Palms that constituted the bulk of the Mercer family wealth. I stood near the heavy velvet drapes of the bay window, nursing a glass of water I had no intention of drinking. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit that felt too sharp, too structured for the pastel and linen aesthetic of the room. It marked me as an outsider, a visitor from Washington, D.C., a woman who dealt in contracts and compliance rather than handshakes and Southern charm. I watched them all, my aunts, uncles, and cousins orbiting around my brother, Logan Mercer, like he was the sun, and they were cold planets desperate for warmth. Logan stood in the center of the Persian rug, a crystal tumbler of bourbon in one hand. He looked the part of the heir apparent. He was tall, with the kind of practiced ease that comes from never having been told no in 35 years. He had loosened his tie, a visual signal that the hard work was done, even though he had never actually done any of it. "It is not just about the assets," Logan was saying, his voice booming slightly, projecting to the back of the room where I stood. "It is about stewardship. Dad built this portfolio from the ground up. It takes a steady hand to keep the ships afloat. It takes someone who is actually here, on the ground, dealing with the contractors and the tenants every single day." He paused to take a sip of his drink, letting the amber liquid catch the light. "That is why," Logan continued, his eyes sweeping over the room before landing briefly, dismissively, on me. "It makes sense for the titles to be consolidated. 8 houses, 1 manager. It is cleaner. It protects the legacy. And frankly, I am ready to take that burden entirely off Dad's shoulders." A ripple of applause broke out. It was polite at first, then enthusiastic. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looked at Logan with a devotion that bordered on religious. "He is right, Harold," my mother said, turning to my father, who sat in his high-backed leather armchair, like a judge presiding over a sentencing hearing. "Logan has stepped up so much these last 18 months. He is the only one who knows the business." My father, Harold Mercer, nodded slowly. He was a man of few words, mostly because he preferred his decisions to be treated as natural laws rather than opinions. "Logan is the man on the ground," Dad said, his voice gravelly and final. "He has earned it. The portfolio goes to him, 100%. The room exhaled. It was done. The verbal contract was sealed in front of witnesses. "What about Natalie?" Aunt Carol asked, though her tone suggested she was asking merely to check a box on a social etiquette form, not because she actually cared. My mother waved a hand in the air, dismissing the question as if it were a gnat. "Oh, Natalie has her life up in D.C., don't you? Dear, she is so busy with her corporate job. She does not have the time or the inclination to worry about hurricane insurance and septic tank repairs in South Carolina. It would just be a burden to her." "Exactly," Logan said, pivoting to face me fully now. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. It was a predator's smile, confident that the prey was already trapped. I am doing you a favor, Nat. You get to stay in the city. Keep your hands clean. I will handle the grit work. You do not need a share of the headache. I did not respond immediately. I just watched the consensus form around them. It was a ritual I had seen 1,000 times since childhood. Logan wanted, so Logan received. I existed, so I was tolerated. They expected me to do what I always did, nod, offer a tight, constrained smile, and retreat to the airport before the sun went down. They expected the good daughter who made no waves, but they had not noticed the suitcase. It was a sleek, black, hard-shell carry-on, standing upright next to the beige sofa, stark against the soft cream tones of the room. It was not near the door. It was right there, in the center of the visual field. Yet they had ignored it because they had ignored me. Logan took another sip of bourbon, but as he lowered the glass, his eyes flickered. He looked at me, and then his gaze drifted down to the suitcase. He frowned, just a fraction of an inch. He knew I had arrived 3 hours ago. He knew I had already put my overnight bag in the guest room. So why was there another case in the living room? I saw the question form in his mind. But he pushed it away. He was winning. He was not going to let a piece of luggage ruin his coronation. Well, Logan said, raising his glass high. To the future, to the Mercer legacy. To the legacy, the room chorused. I stepped forward. The movement was small, but it broke the rhythm of the room. I walked out of the shadows of the drapes and into the center of the light. I did not raise a glass. I did not smile the way a sister should. That is a lovely speech, Logan, I said. My voice was calm, steady, pitched low so that people had to stop clinking their ice cubes to hear me. Truly, the part about stewardship was particularly moving. Logan's jaw tightened. Natalie, do not start. We are having a good time. I am having a wonderful time, I assured him. I am just confused. I turned my head and looked directly at my father. Harold Mercer was staring at me with that familiar mix of annoyance and exhaustion he reserved solely for his daughter. Confused about what? Dad snapped. The decision is made. Natalie, do not make a scene. I smiled then. It was a soft smile, almost gentle. It was the smile of someone who watches a child run confidently toward a glass door. Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the silence. Don't you know? My father froze, his hand, resting on the arm of the leather chair, stopped tapping. There was something in my tone, not anger, not petulance, but genuine, terrifying pity that made him pause. He blinked, looking from me to Logan, and then back to me. Know what? He demanded. Though his voice lacked its earlier iron, I did not answer him with words. Instead, I reached down and grabbed the handle of the black suitcase. The sound of the wheels rolling across the hardwood floor between the rugs was the only sound in the house. It was a low rumble, like distant thunder. I pulled the case to the center of the room, directly in front of the coffee table where the hors d'oeuvres were spread out. I stood there for a moment, letting the tension stretch until it was thin enough to snap. Logan looked like he wanted to laugh, to mock me for bringing laundry into a business meeting, but the look on my face stopped him. He had never seen me like this. He had only ever seen the sister who folded, the sister who walked away. He did not recognize the woman standing in front of him. I knelt down. Click. The sound of the latches unlocking was sharper than a gunshot in the quiet room. I flipped the lid open. There were no clothes inside. There were no shoes, no toiletries, no souvenirs from Washington. The suitcase was packed tight with files. Rows and rows of color-coded hanging folders, thick with paper, red folders, blue folders, and right in the front, a thick binder with a spine labeled in bold, black block letters. I reached in and pulled out a single stack of documents clipped together. I did not hand them to anyone. I just placed them on the coffee table, right next to the shrimp cocktail. Then I pulled out another stack, and another. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of the paper hitting the wood was heavy. These were not photocopies of recipes. These were legal weight documents, deeds, bank statements, notarized affidavits. Natalie, what is this? Mom asked, her voice trembling. She stood up, clutching her pearls as if they could protect her from reality. What are you doing? I am helping you with the distribution. Mom, I said, not looking up as I continued to unload the suitcase. Since we are talking about the rental properties, and the legacy, and who actually owns what. Logan stepped forward, his face flushing a dark, angry red. You are bluffing. You are just trying to ruin the moment because you are jealous. Put that trash away. He reached for the first stack of papers I had set down. I would be careful with that, I said, my voice icy. That is the original forensic accounting log for the Folly Beach maintenance account. You might want to wash your hands before you touch it. The grease from the shrimp might smudge the evidence of the $20,000 you funneled into your personal credit card debt last July. Logan's hand stopped in midair. He looked as if he had been slapped. What did you say? Dad asked. He was leaning forward now, the leather of his chair creaking. I said, I replied, standing up and smoothing out my skirt, that Logan is right. He has been very busy the last 18 months, but he has not been managing the properties. Dad, he has been harvesting them. Liar, Logan shouted. The veneer of the sophisticated businessman cracked instantly, revealing the petulant child underneath. She is lying. She is just jealous because she got cut out. I did not get cut out. Logan, I said softly. You cannot be cut out of something that does not belong to the people giving it away. Before anyone could process that riddle, the front doorbell chimed. The sound made everyone jump. It was a cheerful, innocent sound that had no business interrupting the carnage unfolding in the living room. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, hurried to answer it. A moment later, Grant Holloway walked in. Grant was the family attorney. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and a smile that cost $400 an hour. He was carrying a bottle of champagne, clearly arriving late to join the toast. He walked into the room with a bounce in his step, oblivious to the fact that he had just walked into a firing squad. Sorry I'm late. Everyone, Grant boomed, beaming at my father. Traffic on the bridge was a nightmare, but I made it for the big moment to Logan. Right? The new king of the castle. He raised the champagne bottle, looking around for approval. His eyes swept over the room. He saw my mother crying. He saw Logan standing with his face drained of color, his hand hovering over a stack of papers. He saw my father looking like he was having a cardiac event. And then, Grant looked at the coffee table. He saw the stack of documents I had laid out. Specifically, he saw the blue cover sheet of the document on top of the second pile. The font was large. The seal was gold and embossed. It was a specific type of legal instrument that Grant Holloway had not drafted, but he recognized it instantly. The smile slid off Grant's face like wet clay. His skin went from a healthy flush to the color of old parchment. He lowered the champagne bottle slowly, his eyes locking onto the document, and then snapping up to meet mine. I stood by the open suitcase, my hand resting lightly on the handle. I did not say a word. I just raised one eyebrow. Grant Holloway swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He looked at my father, then at Logan, and finally back at the document that effectively rendered his entire career with the Mercer family obsolete. Harold, Grant whispered, his voice cracking. Harold, tell me you did not sign those. To understand why I brought a suitcase full of forensic evidence to a family party, you have to understand the specific architecture of my invisibility. It did not happen overnight. You do not become a ghost in your own home by accident. It is a slow, deliberate erosion, like the way the tide eats the shoreline at Folly Beach, until one day, the ground just isn't there anymore. Growing up, the Mercer household operated on a very specific economic model. It was not communism, where everyone got the same, and it was not capitalism, where you kept what you earned. It was a monarchy. Logan was the crown prince, and I was the scullery maid who was expected to be grateful for the roof over her head. My brother was the golden child. It is a term people throw around in psychology articles, but living with one is a visceral, daily education in injustice. Logan was loud. He was demanding. He took up space. When he walked into a room, the atmosphere changed to accommodate his mood. If Logan was happy, we were all allowed to be happy. If Logan was angry, the house held its breath until he was appeased. I was the easy child. That was the label my mother gave me with a sigh of relief that always sounded a little too much like dismissal. Natalie is so low maintenance, she would say to her friends over bridge games, Natalie just takes care of herself. I learned early on that being low maintenance was a trap. It meant that because I did not scream, I did not get fed, because I did not break things, I was not worth fixing. Because I did not demand attention, I was rendered invisible. Dinner time was the theater where this play was performed every single night. I remember sitting at the long mahogany table when I was 14 years old. My father sat at the head, carving a roast with the precision of a surgeon, while my mother fluttered around filling water glasses. I told Coach that the defensive line is weak without me, Logan announced, shoveling potatoes into his mouth. He was 16, broad-shouldered, and already wearing the arrogance of a man who knows he will inherit the earth. I told him, if you want to win regionals, you put me in for the full 4 quarters, no rotation. Good for you, son, Dad said, beaming. He put an extra slice of the best meat onto Logan's plate. You have to show leadership. These coaches, they get timid. They need an alpha to tell them what is what. I think they are going to make me captain next year, Logan said, talking with his mouth full. They basically have to. Of course they will, Mom added, looking at him with eyes that shone with adoration. Who else would they pick? You are the heart of that team. I sat there, cutting my carrots into tiny, precise circles. I waited for a lull in the conversation, a small gap where I could insert my own news. I won the state essay contest today, I said quietly. The silence that followed was not the stunned silence of awe. It was the awkward silence of an interruption. That is nice, honey, Mom said, without looking at me. She was busy refilling Logan's iced tea. Did you hear that? Harold Natalie wrote a story. Essay, I corrected. It was on civic responsibility. There is a $500 scholarship bond. Good, Dad said, his eyes still fixed on Logan. Hey, son, did you check the tire pressure on the Jeep like I asked? We cannot have you driving on soft tires. Yeah, I will get to it, Logan grunted. Don't forget, Dad said, his voice softening into that camaraderie he never shared with me. Take care of your gear, and your gear takes care of you. And that was it. My state championship, my academic triumph, was washed away by the tire pressure of a Jeep Wrangler that my parents had bought him for his birthday. It was treated with the same level of interest as a weather report predicting mild rain. That was the emotional baseline, but the financial double standard was where the knife really twisted. The summer I turned 16, I found a specialized program for pre-law students in Washington, D.C. It was an immersive 3-week course. It cost $1,200. I had saved $300 from babysitting, and I needed my parents to cover the rest. I put together a presentation. I had brochures. I had a budget. I sat them down on a Tuesday night. We just do not have the liquidity right now. Natalie, Dad said, sighing as if I had asked him to donate a kidney. The rental properties have had a hard quarter. HVAC repairs, taxes. $1,200 is a lot of money for a summer camp. It is not a camp, I argued, trying to keep my voice steady. It is an academic intensive. It looks amazing on college applications. We have to prioritize, Mom said, reaching out to pat my hand with a pitying condescension that made my skin crawl. Maybe next year. We just have to tighten our belts right now. I accepted it. I swallowed the disappointment and told myself that we were a family, and families made sacrifices. 5 days later, I came home from school to find a brand new jet ski sitting in the driveway on a trailer. It was bright yellow, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Logan was circling it, running his hand over the vinyl seat. Dad got it for us for the lake house, Logan shouted when he saw me. Sweet, right. I walked into the house, my backpack feeling like it contained bricks. I found my father in the kitchen, drinking a beer. A jet ski, I asked. You said we didn't have liquidity. Dad didn't even look guilty. He looked annoyed that I was questioning his judgment. That is different, Natalie. That is an investment in family time. It is for everyone to use. Besides, Logan has been working hard helping me with the rentals. He deserves a little reward. That was the first time I realized that family money was a myth. There was money for Logan, and there were excuses for me. The work Logan was doing was the final insult, starting when he was 18. Dad began taking him on rounds to the 8 rental properties. He called it managerial training. In reality, it was a masterclass in entitlement. I tagged along once, sitting in the back seat of the Lincoln Town Car because Mom was sick and couldn't pick me up from band practice. I watched as Dad and Logan pulled up to the duplex on Isle of Palms. Now, watch how I handle this, Dad told Logan. Tenants are like children. Give them an inch. They take a mile. You have to be firm. Logan got out of the car, wearing sunglasses and a polo shirt that cost more than the tenant's weekly grocery budget. I watched through the window as they stood on the porch. The tenant, a single mother who looked tired, handed Logan an envelope of cash. Logan took it. He didn't count it. He just slapped the envelope against his palm, laughed at something Dad said, and then turned his back on the woman while she was still talking about a leak in the roof. When they got back in the car, Logan tossed the envelope onto the dashboard. She is annoying, Logan said, always whining about the plumbing. That is the game, son, Dad said, chuckling. They pay us to tolerate the whining. You did good. You looked the part. Authority. That is what matters. I kept a 50 for my trouble. Right? Logan asked, grinning. Commission, Dad agreed. Buy yourself some lunch. I sat in the back, silent. I realized then that Logan wasn't learning how to manage property. He was learning how to be a feudal lord. He was learning that the money belonged to him by divine right and that the people living in the houses were just inconveniences that generated cash. He was learning that he could take a cut off the top and call it leadership. When I finally got the scholarship to the university in Daichusi, it felt like a prison break. I had worked myself into the ground for 4 years, maintaining a perfect GPA, padding my resume with extracurriculars, doing everything I could to ensure I wouldn't need a dime of their money. When the acceptance letter came, full tuition and a stipend for housing, the reaction at home was not pride. It was relief. Well, that is a load off, Dad said, reading the financial aid award letter. I was wondering how we were going to swing tuition with the market being so volatile. And Disa is so far away, Mom said, though she was already mentally rearranging my bedroom into a guest suite. But I suppose you have always been independent. You do not need us the way Logan does. Logan needs us because you crippled him. I wanted to scream. You crippled him with yeses. But I didn't say it. I didn't say anything. I packed my own boxes. I loaded my own car. On the morning I left for Washington, Logan didn't even wake up to say goodbye. He had been out late partying with his friends. Dad shook my hand in the driveway, a gesture so formal it felt like a business transaction. Mom hugged me, but her eyes were already drifting to the second-floor window where her precious boy was sleeping. Drive safe, she said. Don't get into trouble. I won't, I said. I drove north on I-95 and I didn't cry. I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, hard clarity settling in my chest. For 22 years, I had been the furniture. I had been the girl in the corner of the room close enough to be counted in the family census, but far enough away to be ignored. But the thing about sitting in the corner is that you have the best view of the room. You see everything. I saw the way Dad fudged the tax numbers in April. I saw the way Mom covered for Logan when he scraped the car and blamed it on a parking lot hit and run. I saw the way Logan looked at the rental income not as a business revenue, but as a personal piggy bank. They thought my silence was weakness. They thought I was quiet because I was easy or shy or compliant. They were wrong. Silence is not empty. Silence is where you keep the data. I realized on that drive that I had been gathering evidence my entire life. I just didn't know what I was building a case for yet. The only person who ever saw through the silence was my grandmother, Martha Rowan. My mother's mother lived 2 hours south in Beaufort, in a small, sturdy house that smelled of marsh grass and old books. She was a woman made of iron and salt water, the true matriarch who had originally owned the land the rental properties were built on. She never bought into the cult of Logan. I remember visiting her just before I left for Dynasty. I sat on her porch, watching the shrimp boats trawling in the distance. "You are leaving," Grandma Martha stated. It wasn't a question. She was rocking in her chair, a quilt over her knees despite the heat. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I got a scholarship?" "Good," she said. She turned her head, her eyes sharp and clear behind her spectacles. "This house, this family, it shrinks people. It is shrinking your father into a coward and your brother into a fool." I looked at her, surprised. No one ever spoke ill of the Mercer men. "And you," she continued, pointing a gnarled finger at me. "They think you are soft because you are quiet, but I know the difference between a lamb and a wolf waiting for the right moon." A shiver went down my spine. "I am not a wolf, Grandma," I said. "Not yet," she smiled, and it was a terrifying, conspiratorial smile. "But you will be. The world is going to teach you how to use your teeth, Natalie, and when you are ready to bite, you come see me. I have some things in my safe that belong to the wolf, not the sheep." That conversation replayed in my head for years. It was the only validation I ever received, while my parents saw a daughter they could ignore. Martha Rowan saw a weapon she could sharpen, and now, standing in the living room with the suitcase open, I knew she had been right. The easy child had finally become difficult. The silence was over, and the wolf had finally come home to eat. Washington, D.C., was not just a city to me. It was a grid. It was a place of straight lines, logical intersections, and marble buildings where rules were written down and actually followed. For the first time in my life, I was living in a zip code where my last name did not function as a pre-existing condition. I rented a studio apartment in Adams Morgan. It was 500 square feet of expensive independence. The kitchen was barely large enough to turn around in, and the view from the single window was of a brick alleyway that smelled of wet cardboard when it rained. I loved it. I loved it because every single item in that room, from the threadbare rug to the coffee maker that gurgled like a dying engine, was paid for with money I had earned. There were no strings attached to the toaster. There was no guilt trip hidden in the lease agreement, but the real transformation happened at work. I landed a job at Northbridge Risk and Compliance, a mid-sized firm that specialized in corporate auditing and forensic contract analysis. It sounds dry. To most people, it sounds like the kind of job that sucks the soul out of you. But for me, it was like being handed a sword after years of fighting with a plastic spoon. At Northbridge, my ability to be quiet, to observe, and to notice the things others ignored was not a character flaw. It was a billable skill. I remember my first major catch. I was 3 months into the job, sitting in a glass-walled cubicle, staring at a vendor contract for a logistics company in Baltimore. My supervisor, a woman named Elena, who wore sharp blazers and did not suffer fools, had dropped the file on my desk with a shrug. "Standard renewal," she had said. "Just check the compliance boxes and send it through." I could have done that. It would have been the easy thing to do, but I saw a pattern in the fuel surcharge addendums. The percentages fluctuated by 0.2% in months, where the national average had remained flat. It was a tiny discrepancy, a rounding error. I dug deeper. I pulled the invoices for the last 24 months. I cross-referenced the fuel indices. I realized that the vendor was manually adjusting the surcharge rate based on a projected model, not the actual spot price, which was a violation of Clause 14, Section B. When I presented the findings to Elena, she looked at the spreadsheet, then at me. "How long did this take you?" she asked. 2 hours, I said. "And how much did you find?" "Over the course of the contract, about $150,000 in overcharges." Elena smiled. It was the first time I had seen a genuine smile of respect directed at me in my adult life. "Good catch, Fox," You have got eyes like a hawk." That moment changed everything. I realized that the world was full of people like Logan, people who cut corners, people who thought they could fudge the numbers because they were charming or loud or powerful. And then there were people like me. We were the antibodies. We were the ones who checked the math. I built a life in D.C. I made friends who knew me as Natalie the analyst, the woman who made a mean risotto and could spot a liar across a crowded bar. I went to happy hours. I dated a nice architect for 6 months who listened when I talked. I was happy. I was free. I had almost convinced myself that the Mercer family drama was a closed chapter, a book I had left on a shelf in South Carolina to gather dust. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday night in October. It was not my mother, calling to guilt me about missing a holiday. It was not my father, calling to ask for a technical favor he would never thank me for. "Natalie," the voice said, "it is Martha." My grandmother never called. She believed the telephone was for emergencies and death notifications. Her voice was calm, steady, and smelled of salt water even through the fiber optic lines. "Grandma." I sat up on my sofa, muting the television. "Is everything okay? Is it your heart?" "My heart is fine," she said. "It is my patience that is failing. I need you to come home this weekend." "I don't know if I can," I stammered. The thought of walking back into my parents' house made my stomach turn. "Work is really busy. And not to Charleston," she interrupted. "To Beaufort. Just you. Tell no one. Not your mother, not your father, and certainly not that brother of yours." There was a tone in her voice I had never heard before. It was the tone of a general mobilizing troops. It was urgent, but it wasn't panicked. It was the sound of a decision that had already been made. "What is going on?" I asked. "I have some reading material for you," she said, "and I think you are the only person in this family who will know how to read it." I drove down on Friday afternoon. As I crossed the border into South Carolina, the landscape changed. The sharp, vertical lines of the city melted into the flat, humid expanse of the low country. The air got heavier. The light got softer. By the time I turned onto the gravel driveway of my grandmother's cottage in Beaufort, the sun was setting, painting the marsh grass in impossible shades of gold and violet. Grandma Martha was waiting on the porch. She looked exactly the same as she had the day I left, a small, sturdy woman in a floral house dress, with white hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She didn't hug me. We weren't huggers. She just nodded, held the screen door open, and said, "You made good time. Wash your hands." I made crab soup. The cottage was a sanctuary. It smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the pluff mud from the creek out back. It was quiet, but unlike my parents' house, the silence here wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. We ate dinner with the windows open, listening to the cicadas. We talked about my job. I told her about the logistics audit, about the fuel surcharges. She listened intently, nodding at the technical parts, her eyes gleaming with approval. "You have learned to look under the rocks," she said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "It is my job," I said. "It is survival," she corrected. After the dishes were cleared, she led me to the kitchen table. The surface was scrubbed pine, clean except for 2 thick file folders sitting in the center under the warm glow of the hanging lamp. One folder was red, one was blue. "Sit down," Grandma said. I sat. She took the chair opposite me, folding her hands on the table. "You know the rental properties," she began. "The 8 houses on Folly and Isle of Palms." "Of course," I said. "Dad and Logan manage them." "They manage them," she repeated, the word tasting sour in her mouth. "But the deeds are in my name. Your grandfather and I bought those lots when Folly Beach was nothing but sand spurs and shacks. I let your father handle the business side when he married your mother because I was tired of chasing tenants for rent. And lately, he has let Logan take the reins." She pushed the red folder toward me. "Open it." I flipped the cover. Inside was a chaotic mess of photocopied bank statements, handwritten ledgers, and loose receipts. It looked like a nightmare. I started getting suspicious about 6 months ago, Grandma said. The deposits into the main account were getting lighter. Logan kept telling me it was a bad season. He said repairs were eating up the profit. He said the salt air was destroying the HVAC units. I started flipping through the pages. My analyst brain kicked into gear instantly. I didn't see a family tragedy. I saw data points. Here, I pointed to a line item in the ledger. September 4th, HVAC compressor replacement at the Palmetto Drive house, $4,200. Keep looking, Grandma said. I turned the page. October 12th, roof leak repair at the same address, $2,800. Vendor listed as Coastal Quick Fix, LLC. I looked up at her. I have never heard of a company called Coastal Quick Fix. Neither have I, Grandma said grimly. And neither has the Secretary of State. I checked the business registry. It does not exist. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search on the address of the vendor listed on one of the receipts. It was a UPS store in a strip mall in North Charleston. He is fabricating expenses, I whispered. He is writing checks to a shell company or a fake vendor and then cashing them himself. It gets worse, Grandma said. Look at the dates. I scanned the ledger again. The repairs always happened around the 1st of the month, right after the rent checks cleared, and the amounts they were specific, not random numbers like you get with parts and labor. They were round numbers, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000. He is skimming, I said. He is treating the maintenance fund like an ATM. I estimate he has pulled out close to $60,000 in the last year and a half, Grandma said calmly. Maybe more. My eyes aren't as good as yours. I stared at the papers. This wasn't just incompetence. This was fraud. Grand larceny. And it was my brother. Does Dad know? I asked. The question hung in the air. Grandma didn't answer immediately. She reached out and touched the blue folder, but she didn't open it yet. I showed Harold the bank statements 3 months ago, she said softly. I told him the numbers did not add up. I told him Logan was spending more on repairs than the houses were worth. My heart hammered against my ribs. And what did he say? He told me I was confused, Grandma said, her voice hardening. He told me I didn't understand the modern cost of labor. He said Logan was doing a great job and that I should stop nitpicking. He said if I made a fuss, it would destroy Logan's confidence. I felt the blood drain from my face. He defended him. He protected him, Grandma corrected. There is a difference. Defending is when you think someone is innocent. Protecting is when you know they are guilty, but you care more about the appearance of the family than the truth. I looked down at the red folder. The betrayal wasn't just Logan stealing. It was my father holding the flashlight for him. It was the realization that my father knew his son was a thief, and his solution was to gaslight his own mother to keep the secret. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Because I am 82 years old. Natalie, Grandma said, I am not going to live forever, and the way your father has drawn up the will, the moment I die, those houses go to him, and from him, they go to Logan. They will drain every cent of equity out of them within 5 years, and the legacy your grandfather built will be gone. She pushed the blue folder across the table. This, she said, is the steering wheel. I opened the blue folder. It was thick with heavy, legal bond paper. At the top was a document titled, The Martha Rowan Irrevocable Living Trust. I read the first page, then the second. I looked at the structure. It was brilliant. It was aggressive. It transferred the ownership of all 8 properties out of Martha Rowan's personal name and into the trust entity immediately. And there, listed as the successor trustee, the person who would have absolute control over the assets if Martha became incapacitated or upon her death, and who had immediate oversight powers starting today, was a single name, Natalie Fox. You want me to take over? I asked, looking up at her. Grandma, this is war. If we execute this, Logan loses everything. Dad loses control. They lost their right to control when they decided to steal from an old woman, Grandma said. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was like steel. People promise with their mouths. Natalie, your father promised to take care of me. Logan promised to be a good steward, but promises are just air. She tapped the blue folder with her index finger. Papers. Papers live longer than promises. Papers have teeth. I looked at the documents. I looked at the red folder full of lies and the blue folder full of consequences. I thought about the easy child. I thought about the girl who sat in the corner and accepted the scraps. I thought about the fuel surcharges I had found in the contract at Northbridge. I remembered the rush of power I felt when I proved that the numbers didn't lie. I wasn't the easy child anymore. I was the auditor, and my family was about to be audited. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Grandma pulled a fountain pen from her pocket. She uncapped it and set it down next to the blue folder. "We go to the notary tomorrow morning," she said. "We sign the deeds over to the trust. We file them with the county clerk before lunch, and then we wait." "Wait for what?" "For the inheritance distribution," Grandma said, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "Your mother called me yesterday. She wants to have a big family gathering next month to celebrate Logan's hard work and formally announce the future of the properties. She thinks it is going to be a coronation." I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. It felt like a weapon. "It won't be a coronation," I said, meeting my grandmother's gaze. "No," she agreed. "It will be an eviction." I looked at the red folder one last time. "Grandma, about Dad, do you think he is taking a cut? Or is he just letting Logan do it?" Grandma sighed, looking out the dark window toward the marsh. "That is the question, isn't it? I think Harold is a weak man who wants to be a rich man's father. He knows Logan is stealing, but as long as the checks keep coming to him too, he won't ask where the money comes from." She looked back at me. "But that stops tomorrow. You are going to stop it." I looked at the document. Successor trustee. "I am not just going to stop it," I said, feeling a cold calm settle over me, the same calm I felt when I found a discrepancy in a spreadsheet. "I am going to close the account." I didn't know it then, but that night in the kitchen was the end of Natalie Fox, the daughter. It was the birth of Natalie Fox, the plaintiff, and I was ready to drive. The kitchen table in Beaufort became a courtroom that night, though the only judge present was an 82-year-old woman drinking herbal tea, and the only prosecutor was her granddaughter. The humid darkness outside pressed against the screen door, but inside, under the harsh light of the hanging lamp, everything was clinical, cold, precise. We spent the next 4 hours dissecting the corpse of my family's integrity. My grandmother explained the ownership structure first. It was simpler than I had imagined, which was exactly why it was so vulnerable. For 40 years, the deeds to the 8 properties, 5 on Folly Beach, 3 on the Isle of Palms, had remained solely in the name of Martha Rowan. When my grandfather passed, the family simply assumed the natural order of things. Dad took over the heavy lifting, and eventually, the titles would slide into his name through probate when Grandma died. It was a system built on trust, and trust, I was learning, was a depreciating asset. 18 months ago, Grandma said, her finger tracing a line on the ledger. "Logan came to me. He said he wanted to professionalize the operation. He said your father was getting too old to handle the late-night calls about burst pipes. He asked for access to the business checking account. Not full signatory power on the savings, just the operating account for maintenance. And you gave it to him," I said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a clarification. "I did," she nodded. "He is my grandson. I thought it was time he learned the value of $1. I pulled the red folder closer. "He learned the value, all right. He learned that if he moves $1 from here to there, nobody notices." I opened my laptop and connected to the spotty Wi-Fi. I needed to verify what my gut was already screaming at me. I started running the vendor names from the suspicious receipts against the South Carolina Business Registry and the Better Business Bureau database. "Look at this," I said, turning the screen toward her. "This vendor, Marshside Reno Repair, They have billed us for $12,000 in the last 6 months for painting and drywall. The salt air is hard on paint, Grandma offered, though her voice lacked conviction. It is, I agreed. But Marshside Reno Repair lists its headquarters as a residential address in West Ashley. I just pulled it up on Google Earth. It is an apartment complex. And the phone number. I dialed it on speaker. The number you have reached is not in service. Dead air, I said, ending the call. But the checks were cashed. Who endorsed them? We dug out the returned check images from the bank statement. The signature on the back was illegible. A scrawl that looked like a seismograph reading during an earthquake, but the deposit stamp was clear. It wasn't a business account deposit. It was an ATM deposit. He is writing checks to a ghost, I said, my voice flat. Then he or someone working with him is depositing them into a private personal account. It is classic embezzlement. It is not even sophisticated. It is lazy. I found the smoking gun in the work orders. Logan was so confident that no one would check his homework that he had stopped trying to be creative. Read this description for the repair at 104 Palmetto Boulevard from February. I told Grandma. She squinted at the paper. Emergency repair. Master bathroom subflooring water damage due to leaking wax ring. Replaced plywood and retiled. $3,200. Now read the one for 309 Ocean Drive from May. She read it. She stopped halfway through. She looked up at me. It is the same, she whispered. Word for word, I said. He copy-pasted the description. Emergency repair. Master bathroom subflooring water damage due to leaking wax ring. He didn't even change the typo. He spelled tiled with 2 L's in both documents. Unless we have a pandemic of identical toilet leaks destroying identical square footage of plywood 3 months apart. He is lying. I sat back, the adrenaline of the hunt mixing with a deep, nauseating sadness. This wasn't just stealing, this was contempt. Logan thought so little of Grandma and by extension, the rest of us, that he didn't even bother to vary his lies. He assumed we were too stupid to notice or too afraid to ask. He has drained the reserve fund, I summarized. The account should have $40,000 in it for hurricane season deductibles. It has $4,000. Grandma closed the red folder. She didn't slam it. She closed it gently, like she was closing the lid on a coffin. That is enough, she said. I do not need to see any more. Now, open the blue one again. I opened the blue folder containing the trust documents. This was the weapon. Grandma had not just been sitting on her porch rocking away her twilight years. She had found a lawyer in Savannah, someone completely outside my father's Charleston social circle, and she had drafted an irrevocable living trust. I read through the clauses, my legal training from reviewing contracts at Northbridge kicking in. It was a masterpiece of asset protection. The trust would take immediate ownership of all 8 properties. Martha Rowan was the initial trustee, keeping her in control while she breathed. But the power lay in the succession. Successor trustee Natalie Fox. I read the powers granted to me. I would have the authority to hire and fire management, to sell, to lease, to audit, and to control every single dime that flowed in or out of the properties. It bypassed the will completely. It bypassed probate. The moment this was signed and recorded, the houses were no longer inheritance waiting to happen. They were private property under new management. But the most brilliant part was Clause 14, Section C. I read it out loud. In the event that any family member or beneficiary attempts to coerce, intimidate, or legally force the successor trustee to relinquish control, or if the successor trustee resigns under duress, the assets of the trust shall be immediately frozen, and management shall automatically transfer to the designated corporate fiduciary, effectively liquidating the family interest to fund the charitable remainder. I looked up. The poison pill. Exactly, Grandma said. If they corner you, if they try to bully you into signing a waiver, which your father will try to do, you tell them this. You tell them that if you sign away your rights, the family loses everything. The money goes to the Audubon Society. It forces them to keep you in charge, or they get nothing. You really think they will try to force me? I asked. I think your brother is desperate, she said. And I think your father is compromised. Men like that do not give up power because you ask them nicely. You have to take it. We barely slept. The next morning, Saturday, the air in Beaufort was thick and gray. We drove into town to a small shipping and printing center that had a notary public on duty. We didn't go to a law firm. We didn't want anyone recognizing the name Mercer. The notary was a young woman with bright purple fingernails chewing gum. She didn't know she was witnessing the dismantle of a dynasty. She just saw an old woman and a young woman with a stack of papers. "I need to see ID," she said, popping a bubble. Grandma laid her driver's license on the counter. I laid mine next to it. The ceiling fan above us made a rhythmic click, click, click sound, marking the seconds. It was the only noise in the room besides the scratch of the pen. Grandma signed 8 deeds, transferring each property from Martha Rowan to the Martha Rowan Family Trust. She signed with a steady hand. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look sad. She looked like she was taking out the trash. Then she signed the trust agreement. Then it was my turn. I signed my name as successor trustee, Natalie Fox. The ink looked dark and permanent against the white bond paper. With that signature, I wasn't just accepting a job, I was accepting a war. The notary stamped the documents with a heavy thud. The embossed seal raised the paper, making it official. It was done. We walked out into the parking lot. The humidity hit us like a physical weight. "Now," Grandma said, leaning against her car. "We need to protect the paper." We drove straight to a bank where Grandma had a safe deposit box my father didn't know about. We placed the original wet ink documents inside, but before we did, I used a portable scanner I had brought from DRC to digitize every single page. I encrypted the files. I uploaded them to a secure cloud server. I put a copy on a USB drive and put it on my keychain. "They can burn the house down," I told her. "They can shred the copies. It won't matter." The record exists. Back at the cottage, the mood had shifted. The tension of the execution was gone, replaced by the heavy anticipation of the fallout. Grandma made us tea and sat me down one last time. "You cannot tell them," she said. Her voice was stern. "Natalie, you have to promise me. You go back to Washington. You go back to your job. You let them play their games." "For how long?" I asked. "Until the distribution party," she said. "Your mother told me the date. It is 3 weeks from now. If you tell them before then, they will have time to maneuver. They will try to declare me incompetent. They will try to hide the money Logan stole. You have to catch them when they feel safest. You have to catch them when they are clapping for themselves." "I promise," I said. "I won't say a word." Grandma reached into the pocket of her house dress and pulled out a standard white envelope. It was sealed. On the front, in her spidery but elegant handwriting, were the words, "To be opened only when Logan claims he owns it all." She slid it across the table to me. "What is inside?" I asked, reaching for it. "The final nail," she said. "There is something you do not know, something even you did not find in the ledgers. I was going to take this secret to my grave, but—" She paused, looking out at the marsh grass swaying in the wind. "But I realized that secrets are what made this family sick. The truth is the only medicine left, even if it tastes bitter." I held the envelope. It felt light, but I knew better. "Why wait?" I asked. "Why not give it to me now?" "Because you need to be angry enough to use it," she said simply. "Right now, you are acting on logic. You are acting on justice. That is good. But when you stand in that room and watch them erase you, when you watch your father hand your birthright to a thief, just because he is a man, you are going to need more than logic. You are going to need the truth about why your father really chose him." I tucked the envelope into the inner pocket of my blazer, right next to my heart. "I will wait," I said. Grandma nodded. She looked tired now, the adrenaline fading. She looked all of her 82 years. "Go back to D.C., Natalie," she whispered. "Sharpen your teeth. The next time you see them, you won't be the daughter. You will be the landlord." I left an hour later. I drove back north, the road stretching out before me. My suitcase was in the trunk, but the real cargo was on the USB drive in my pocket and the sealed letter in my jacket. I thought about the easy child. I thought about the years of silence, and as the city skyline of Washington came into view hours later, I realized Grandma was right. I wasn't running away. I was simply moving to the high ground to set up the artillery. Let them have their party. Let Logan print his fake business cards. Let Dad sleep soundly in his denial for 3 more weeks. I had the paper, and paper lives longer than promises. The funeral of Martha Rowan was exactly the kind of event she would have hated. It was loud, it was ostentatious, and it was entirely focused on the people left behind rather than the woman who had gone. My mother had ordered lilies, hundreds of them. The air in the church was so thick with the cloying, sweet scent of funeral flowers that it felt like breathing syrup. I sat in the front pew, wearing black, keeping my spine straight and my mouth shut. I watched my father shake hands with half of Charleston, accepting condolences with the grave, stoic nod of a man bearing a terrible burden. I watched Logan check his watch 3 times during the eulogy. They did not know that I had the USB drive in my purse. They did not know that the woman in the casket had already played her final card, and that I was holding the winning hand. To them, I was just Natalie, the daughter who lived in D.C., the one who would cry a little, eat a ham biscuit at the wake, and then disappear back to her little life of spreadsheets. I had planned to drive back to Washington immediately after the service. I had the car packed. I wanted to get away from the humidity and the hypocrisy. But as I was walking toward the front door, my hand gripping the handle of my suitcase, my mother appeared. She moved with that silent, predatory speed that Southern mothers perfect by the time their children hit puberty. "Natalie," she said, her voice soft, pitched perfectly for a house of mourning. "You are not leaving yet, are you?" "I have work on Monday, Mom," I said. "It is an 8-hour drive." "It is Sunday," she countered, placing a hand on my arm. It wasn't a comfort. It was an anchor. "Stay the night. Your father well. We need to talk. Just the family. To settle things so we can all move on. It is what your grandmother would have wanted." I almost laughed. Grandma Martha would have wanted to burn the house down with them inside. But I nodded. I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to see the shape of the trap before I sprang my own. "Okay," I said. One night. 2 hours later, the dining room had been transformed. The funeral buffet had been cleared away. The ham biscuits and deviled eggs were gone. In their place, the long mahogany table was set for a different kind of meal. There were no placemats. There were no flowers. Instead, there were stacks of paper, a pitcher of ice water, and a fresh pot of coffee that smelled burnt. My father sat at the head of the table. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, a visual signal that we were shifting from grieving son to pragmatic businessman. Logan sat to his right, leaning back in his chair, tapping a gold pen against the wood. My mother sat to Dad's left, her face composed into a mask of tragic necessity. There was one empty chair. At the far end, opposite my father. "Sit down, Natalie," Dad said. It wasn't an invitation. I sat. The silence in the room was heavy, engineered to make me feel small. This was the dynamic I had grown up with, the tribunal of 3 against the 1. "We know this is a hard time," Dad began, folding his hands on the table. "Losing Martha is a blow to all of us, but life goes on, and business goes on. The rental properties, they do not stop needing maintenance just because the owner has passed. We need to ensure continuity," Logan chimed in. He sounded like he was reading from a pamphlet on corporate synergy. "Tenants get nervous when an owner dies. We need to show a strong, unified front." "Exactly," Mom said, nodding. "We do not want any confusion." Dad slid a document across the polished wood. It traveled the length of the table and stopped inches from my hand. "This is a standard waiver," Dad said, his voice casual. Too casual. "Since the will is going into probate, and that can take months, this document simply appoints Logan as the interim manager with full executive authority. It also, To keep things simple, it waives your claim to any direct interference in the asset management. I looked down at the paper. It was titled Waiver of Interest and Delegation of Authority. I didn't need my law degree to understand what I was reading, but my training at Northbridge made the specific clauses leap out at me like neon signs. Irrevocably waives any right to contest management decisions, grants sole power of attorney regarding the disposition of assets located at, agrees to accept a fixed cash settlement to be determined at a later date in lieu of property shares. This wasn't a management agreement. This was a disinheritance disguised as a permission slip. They wanted me to sign away my rights to the houses before the will was even read, in exchange for a cash settlement that they would control. "It is for the best, honey," Mom said, her voice dripping with that poisonous sweetness. "You are in D.C. You are so busy with your checking jobs. You do not have the time to worry about leaky roofs and property taxes. Logan is here. He is ready to take the burden." "It creates a cleaner title," Logan added. "If we want to leverage the equity for renovations, the bank hates seeing multiple names on the deed, especially out-of-state owners. It just complicates the paperwork." I stared at the list of addresses on the second page. 104 Palmetto Boulevard, 309 Ocean Drive, the Folly Beach duplex, 8 lines of text, 8 properties that Grandma had built, 8 properties that Logan had been bleeding dry for 18 months. And now, he wanted me to sign a paper that not only let him get away with it, but gave him the keys to the vault. I looked up. I looked at my father. "You want me to sign away my ownership?" I asked. "Before the will is even read." "It is not signing away ownership." Dad lied smoothly. "It is consolidating management. We are a family, Natalie. We do not need the courts getting involved and taking a cut of your grandmother's hard work. If you sign this, we keep it in the house. We take care of you. We will cut you a check once the season is over." "How much?" I asked. "We will figure that out," Logan said quickly. "Fair market value, minus the overhead. Obviously." "Obviously," I repeated. "Come on, Nat," Logan said, his voice dropping into that tone he used when he wanted to be intimidating. He leaned forward, the gold pen pointing at me like a knife. "Do not be difficult. Not today. Mom is exhausted. Dad is grieving. Just sign the damn paper. No lawyers. No drama. Do not think you are important enough to hold up this entire process." "He is right, dear," Mom added, dabbing at a dry eye. "You have always been the understanding one, the easy one. Don't make this hard on your father. Don't make us look bad in front of the town by dragging this out." The pressure in the room was physical. It was a vice tightening around my chest. They were banking on 26 years of conditioning. They were banking on the fact that Natalie never fought back, that Natalie always folded to keep the peace. I looked at the pen Logan had slid toward me. It was a Mont Blanc, expensive, probably bought with money he had skimmed from the maintenance fund 2 months ago. I reached out and touched the paper. My father let out a small breath he had been holding. He thought he had won. He thought the easy child was doing what she was bred to do. I aligned the edges of the document with the edge of the table. I smoothed out a small crease in the corner, and then, very gently, I pushed it back. The paper slid across the mahogany, making a soft rasping sound, and came to a rest in front of my father. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. Dad blinked. "Excuse me." I said no, I repeated, my voice steady. "I am not signing a waiver. I am not signing over my authority, and I am certainly not accepting a to-be-determined cash settlement." Logan slammed his hand on the table. The water pitcher rattled. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled, his face flushing red. "You think you can just waltz in here from Dodge Sea and dictate terms? You know nothing about this business. You know nothing about what it takes to run this family." "I know enough," I said. I stood up. "I know that Grandma didn't want this." "Grandma was senile," Logan shouted. "She didn't know what day it was half the time." "That is enough," Dad barked. He looked at me, his eyes cold and hard, the mask of the grieving father completely gone. "Natalie, sit down. You are being selfish. You are risking the family stability for what pride, jealousy. For clarity, I said. I picked up my purse. I am going back to Washington. Dad, do not sell anything. Do not leverage anything. And Logan. I looked at my brother. He was vibrating with rage, a spoiled child who had finally been told he couldn't have the toy. Do not spend any money you do not have, I said. You will be back, Logan sneered, leaning back and crossing his arms. You will walk out that door. You will cry in your car, and then you will call us in a week begging to sign, because you do not have the stomach for a fight, Natalie. You never have. Goodbye, Mom, I said. My mother didn't look at me. She was staring at the unsigned paper, her lips pressed into a thin white line. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the foyer, past the wilting lilies, and out into the heavy, humid night. I got into my car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally saying the word that had been stuck in my throat for 2 decades. No. I started the engine. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the lights of the Mercer house behind me. I was 10 minutes down the highway, the dark road stretching out toward the interstate, when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. It was a text message. I didn't recognize the number at first, but then I read the preview, and a chill went through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Sender Ethan, my younger cousin, the quiet one, the one who stood in the back of photos, the one who had driven Grandma to the notary that day because I had asked him to, and who had never said a word about it since. I opened the message. Don't sign anything. I heard them talking before you came in. Logan already has a buyer for the Folly Beach duplex. He took a deposit last week, under the table. I stared at the screen. He had taken a deposit. He was selling property he didn't own. Before the body was even cold, I gripped the steering wheel tight. I wasn't just going to sue them. I was going to bury them. I drove back to Washington, D.C. in the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. The drive took 8 hours. I did not listen to music. I did not listen to podcasts. I replayed the conversation at the dining table over and over in my head, dissecting it frame by frame, looking for the tell. My father's hesitation when he pushed the waiver across the table. Logan's flushed face when I mentioned the word audit. My mother's refusal to make eye contact. They were terrified, and because they were terrified, they were dangerous. I unlocked the door to my Adams Morgan apartment at 3 a.m. The air inside was stale, smelling of the coffee grounds I had left in the trash 2 days ago. I didn't bother to unpack my clothes. I didn't bother to sleep. I walked straight to the small, fireproof safe bolt-locked to the floor of my closet. I spun the dial, right to 22, left to 14, right to 6. The heavy metal door swung open. Inside lay the only thing that mattered, the black accordion folder containing the USB drive and the original, notarized documents from Beaufort. I took it out and placed it on my desk. It hit the surface with a heavy, satisfying thud. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like office supplies. But as I turned on my desk lamp and booted up my 3-monitor workstation, I knew I was looking at a guillotine blade waiting to drop. I brewed a pot of black coffee and opened a fresh Excel spreadsheet. This was my comfort zone. This was where I lived. The world of human emotion is messy and unpredictable, but the world of numbers is binary. Either the money is there, or it is not. Either the signature is valid, or it is a forgery. I labeled the columns: property address, deed book reference, notary date, transfer status. Then I created a second tab: cash flow analysis, valid versus invalid. I worked through the night. The sun came up over the brick alleyway outside my window, painting the room in pale gray light. But I didn't stop. I input every single transaction from the last 18 months. I cross-referenced every repair with weather reports. Logan had claimed storm damage on days when the sun was shining. He had claimed flood mitigation on days with 0 precipitation. At 9 a.m, I made a phone call. Klein and Mercer Law Group, a receptionist answered. How may I direct your call? This is Natalie Fox. I said, I have a referral for David Klein. I need a review of an irrevocable living trust and a chain of title analysis. It is urgent. David Klein was not related to my family, despite the shared surname in his firm. He was a shark in a pinstripe suit who specialized in estate litigation. I had met him once at a networking event, and he had told me that he liked cases where rich people tried to eat their young. I met him at his office at noon. I laid the trust documents on his mahogany desk. He read them in silence for 20 minutes. He adjusted his glasses. He frowned. Then he smiled. "This is aggressive," he said, tapping the section on the poison pill. "Clause 14 is a masterpiece. Who drafted this?" "A grandmother who was tired of being lied to." I said. "It holds water," Klein said, looking up at me. "The asset transfer is clean. The recording dates precede the death. Technically, these properties never entered the probate estate. They belong to the trust, and as of Saturday morning, you are the trust." "I need to be sure," I said. "They are going to try to challenge my competency. They are going to claim I coerced her." "Let them try," Klein said, leaning back. "You have video of the signing." "No," I said. "But I have the notary's affidavit, and I have a letter from her primary care physician attesting to her mental state dated 2 days before the signing. Grandma thought of everything." Klein handed the papers back to me. "You are bulletproof, Ms. Fox, but be warned, when you pull this trigger, you are not just taking the houses, you are humiliating the patriarch. Courts can handle the law, but they cannot handle the rage." "I can handle the rage," I said. I went back to my apartment and back to the spreadsheet. That was when the digital barrage began. It started with the peacekeeper phase. My phone buzzed. "Mom, Natalie, please call us. Your father is so upset. We didn't mean to pressure you. We just want what is best for the family. Come back down. We can talk about a smaller settlement." I didn't reply. I logged the text into a separate document titled Communication Log. An hour later, the tone shifted. "Aunt Carol, I heard you stormed out of the funeral. How could you be so selfish? Your poor mother is grieving, and you are making this about money. Shame on you." I took a sip of cold coffee. I typed the timestamp and the content into the log. Then came the threats. "Logan, you think you are smart walking away? You are just delaying the inevitable. I am selling the Folly duplex next week. Dad already signed off on it. You are going to get nothing if you don't sign that waiver by Friday." I stared at the text. Dad already signed off on it. That was the loose thread. I went back to my monitors. I pulled up the public records for the Charleston County Register of Deeds. If Logan was selling, or trying to sell, there would be a paper trail, a title search, a lien check. I didn't find a sale pending, but I found something else. I found a UCC financing statement filed 6 months ago against the Mercer Family Management entity, an entity I didn't know existed. I pulled the filing. It was a secured loan for $200,000. High interest, short term, the kind of loan you take when banks won't touch you. The collateral listed was future rental income and equipment. And there, at the bottom of the PDF, were the signatures, Logan Mercer, managing member, and below it, Harold Mercer, guarantor. I zoomed in on my father's signature. I had seen my father sign his name 1,000 times. I knew the loop of the H and the sharp point of the M. This signature was shaky. It looked like Dad's, but the pressure points were wrong. The ink flow was hesitant in the curves. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the twist. This was the reason for the desperation. Logan hadn't just stolen the maintenance money to live a lavish lifestyle. He was servicing a massive, off-the-books debt. He had borrowed $200,000 from a predatory lender, likely to cover gambling debts or a bad investment, and he had used the family business as collateral. But the signature, if Dad signed it, he was complicit in leveraging Grandma's property without her consent. If Logan forged it, he had committed a felony against his own father. And suddenly, the text from Ethan made sense. Dad is trapped. Dad wasn't defending Logan because he was the golden child anymore. Dad was defending Logan because if Logan went down, The loan would be called in. If the lender found out the collateral was fraudulent, or if the title transferred to a trust that refused to honor the debt, the house of cards would collapse. Dad wasn't protecting the legacy. He was protecting himself from bankruptcy or a fraud charge. I felt a wave of nausea, followed instantly by a cold, clarifying anger. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "If that is how you want to play it?" I plugged in my high-speed printer. I began to assemble the binders. I didn't just throw papers together. I curated them. I built them like I was building a case for a federal prosecutor. Binder 1, the trust, the blue binder, the legal authority, the shield. Binder 2, the deeds, the red binder, the proof of ownership, the sword. Binder 3, bank irregularities. The black binder, the spreadsheet of every stolen dollar, every fake invoice, every phantom repair. Binder 4, vendor fraud. The white binder. This was the thickest one. It contained the corporate search results for Coastal Quick Fix and Marshside Reno. It contained the evidence linking the repair payments to the shell company that was paying monthly installments on the $200,000 loan. I printed 3 copies of everything, one for me, one for the lawyer I would eventually have to hire in South Carolina, and one for the table at the distribution party. It took me 2 days to finalize the package. By Wednesday night, my apartment looked like a war room. I had one last call to make. I dialed the number for Seabrook Property Management. They were the premier agency in Charleston. They managed the high-end rentals on Kiowa Island. They were expensive, ruthless, and impeccably honest. "Seabrook Management, this is Richard," a smooth voice answered. "Richard, this is Natalie Fox. I am the trustee for the Rowan Mercer portfolio on Folly Beach and Isle of Palms." There was a pause. "I am familiar with the properties, Ms. Fox, but I was under the impression that Logan Mercer managed those." "Not anymore," I said. "I am terminating the current management effective immediately upon my arrival in Charleston next week. I need a transition team on standby." "A transition team?" Richard sounded intrigued. "That usually implies a hostile takeover." "It is a correction," I said. "I need you to have locksmiths, a forensic accountant, and a notification team ready to move on all 8 properties simultaneously. I want the locks changed and the tenants notified of new management within 1 hour of my signal." "We can do that," Richard said, "but we will need a retainer and proof of authority." "I am wiring the retainer today," I said, "and I will bring the proof of authority with me. Just be ready. The date is the 24th. "We will be ready," he said. I hung up. My phone buzzed again. It was my mother, Mom Natalie. "We are so worried about you. You are acting so strange. Just come home. Sign the paper. We can put this all behind us. Don't be the reason this family falls apart." I looked at the text. I looked at the binders stacked on my desk. I wasn't the reason the family was falling apart. I was just the demolition crew arriving to clear the rubble. I didn't type a response. I didn't prepare a speech for the party. I didn't write down a list of grievances or emotional appeals. I simply closed the last binder, the snap of the metal ring sounding like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. I packed the binders into the suitcase. I packed the USB drive. I packed a fresh suit navy blue this time, the color of authority. I was ready. They were expecting a daughter to come back and beg for forgiveness. They were getting a CEO coming to liquidate a failing subsidiary. The drive down Interstate 95 was usually a time for decompression, a time to listen to podcasts or catch up on audiobooks. But today, the interior of my car was silent. There was no radio. There was no music. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the rhythmic thrum of the air conditioning fighting the rising temperature as I crossed the state line into South Carolina. I did not rehearse what I was going to say. I did not practice witty comebacks or legal monologues in the rearview mirror. I did not need to. The script was already written in the ink of notarized deeds and the pixels of bank statements. I checked the rearview mirror, but I was not looking at the traffic behind me. I was looking at the suitcase in the back seat. I had checked it 3 times before leaving Dodge C, and I had pulled over at a rest stop in North Carolina just to check it again. The 3 binders, blue, red, and black, were there, strapped in like precious cargo. They were not just paper. They were the keys to the kingdom, and I was the invading army. I was 2 hours outside of Charleston when my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. The screen displayed a number I did not recognize, but the area code was local to Charleston. "This is Natalie Fox," I answered. "Ms. Fox, this is Sarah Jenkins from Palmetto Title and Escrow," a woman's voice said. She sounded hesitant, the way people do when they are holding a puzzle piece that does not fit. "I hope I'm not bothering you. Your name is listed as a secondary contact on the old insurance policy for the property at 104 Palmetto Boulevard." "I am listening," I said. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Well, we have a Mr. Logan Mercer here on the other line," Sarah continued. "He is inquiring about an expedited title transfer. He wants to know if we can close a cash sale in 48 hours without a full lien search. He says it is an intra-family transfer to a private LLC, but the buyer name he gave is, well, it is an investment group out of Atlanta." I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. Logan wasn't just desperate. He was panicked. He was trying to liquidate the assets before the distribution party. He was trying to sell the house out from under us to pay off the loan shark before I could expose him. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm and professional, "do not process that request." "Excuse me." I said, "Do not process it." I repeated, "Mr. Mercer does not have the authority to sell that property. In fact, if you check the Charleston County Registry from last Saturday, you will see that the title has already been transferred." "Transferred." Sarah sounded confused. "To whom?" "To the Martha Rowan Irrevocable Living Trust." I said, "I am the successor trustee. Any attempt to sell that property by Logan Mercer is fraud. If you facilitate it, your company will be liable." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her typing furiously on her keyboard. "I see," she stammered. "I will put a hold on the file immediately. I will tell Mr. Mercer we need to run a full title abstract. That will buy us 2 weeks." "Do not tell him that," I said. "Tell him the system is down. Tell him the clerk is at lunch. Tell him whatever you want. But do not tell him I spoke to you. I want him to think he's just having bad luck." "Understood. Ms. Fox," she said. I hung up. I immediately dialed David Klein. He answered on the first ring. "He is moving," I told him. "He is trying to quick sell the Palmetto house." "I expected that," Klein said, his voice unbothered. "I have already drafted the lis pendens. I am filing it electronically with the court right now. It puts a public notice on the title that the property is subject to litigation. No title company in the state will touch it. He is dead in the water." "Good," I said. "I want him to feel the walls closing in, but I don't want him to know who built the room." "He will know soon enough," Klein said. "See you at the finish line. Natalie?" I hung up and pressed the accelerator. I wasn't just driving to a party anymore. I was racing to a crime scene. I reached the outskirts of Charleston around 3 in the afternoon. The party, the distribution, as my mother called it, was scheduled for 6. I had 3 hours. I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't go to the hotel where I had booked a room. I drove straight to Folly Beach. The island was busy with tourists, the air thick with the smell of salt spray and fried seafood. I navigated the familiar streets until I pulled up in front of the duplex on Ashley Avenue. This was one of the repair sites. According to Logan's ledger, this house had received a $15,000 roof replacement 2 months ago. I parked and walked up the driveway. The house looked tired. The paint was peeling on the railings. A white van was parked in the shade. A man in blue coveralls was on a ladder, caulking a window frame. I recognized him. It was Mike, a local handyman who had done work for my grandmother for 20 years. "Mike," I called out. He looked down, squinting against the sun. "Natalie? Is that little Natalie Mercer?" He climbed down, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked older, more tired, but his smile was genuine. "I haven't seen you since you went off to the big city. What brings you to the swamp?" "Just checking on the family business. Mike," I said. I gestured to the roof. Looks like you guys did a lot of work up there recently. Mike laughed, a dry, raspy sound. Work, honey. I patched 3 shingles and cleared a bird's nest. That roof is 20 years old. It needs replacing bad. But your brother said there wasn't any money in the budget. I froze. He said there wasn't any money. Yeah, Mike said. I quoted him $12,000 for a tear off and replace. He told me to just patch the leak for $500 and keep it quiet. Said the old lady wouldn't know the difference. I felt the anger boil in my chest, hot and sharp. Logan hadn't just stolen the money. He had left the property to rot while billing the estate for a premium renovation. Mike, I said, pulling out my phone. Can you do me a favor? Can you say exactly that? But while I record it. Mike looked at me, his eyes narrowing. He was a simple man, but he wasn't stupid. He knew trouble when he saw it. Is Logan in trouble? He asked. Logan is confused about the numbers, I said diplomatically. I just need to straighten out the accounting. If you help me, I will make sure you get the contract to actually replace the roof next week. Paid in full. Up front. Mike spat on the ground and nodded. Turn it on. I recorded his statement. I took photos of the old, moss-covered shingles that were supposedly brand new. I took photos of the peeling paint. I took photos of the new HVAC unit that was clearly a rusted hulk from 2010. I had the paper trail. Now I had the physical reality. The gap between the two was where Logan was going to fall. I got back in the car. As I turned the ignition, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was Logan. What are you doing? My heart skipped a beat. Had the title company called him back? Had someone seen me at the beach? Another text followed immediately. The title lady said the system is locked. She said there is a flag on the property. Did you do something? I smiled. He was fishing. He was paranoid. He didn't know what was happening, but he could feel the vibration in the web. I didn't reply. Let him sweat. Let him wonder. Silence is a weapon, and I was wielding it with precision. I drove back toward the mainland, crossing the marsh bridges as the sun began to dip lower, casting long golden shadows across the water. I was 20 minutes away from my parents' house when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. Ethan, be careful tonight. It is tense here. Dad is drinking scotch. That usually means he is scared. I pulled over into a gas station parking lot to reply. Me. Scared of what? The response came 3 dots at a time, agonizingly slow. Ethan, I heard them arguing in the study. Dad isn't protecting Logan because he thinks Logan is a genius. Dad is protecting him because Logan used the family trust as collateral for a private loan. Dad co-signed it, Natalie, but I don't think Dad knew what he was signing until it was too late. He is trapped. If Logan goes down, the bank comes for Dad's retirement. I stared at the screen. It confirmed everything. My father wasn't the villain. He was the fool. He had let his pride and his blind faith in his son lead him into a bear trap, and now, to save his own skin, he was willing to sacrifice me, sacrifice Grandma's legacy, and sacrifice the truth. He had promised Logan the properties not because Logan deserved them, but because Logan needed them to stop the ship from sinking. They were going to use Grandma's life's work to pay off a gambling debt or a failed business venture. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The last lingering bit of guilt, the tiny voice that asked, "Am I being too hard on them?" vanished. They were not a family. They were a cartel, and I was the Fed. "Okay," I said aloud. "Let's go close the file." I arrived at the Mercer estate at 5:45. The driveway was already full of cars. My aunts and uncles were there. The family lawyer, Grant Holloway, was there, his Lexus parked prominently near the front door. I didn't park in the driveway. I parked on the street, half a block down. I wanted to walk in. I wanted to approach the house on my own terms. I pulled the suitcase out of the trunk. The wheels clicked rhythmically on the pavement as I walked up the long, winding path to the front door. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. I could hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of glass, the fake, high-pitched laughter of people pretending everything was fine. I didn't ring the doorbell. I knew the code to the side gate. I slipped into the garden and walked around to the patio doors. The curtains were drawn, but they were sheer. I could see the silhouettes inside. I stood there for a moment in the gathering dusk, listening. "She will come around," I heard my father's voice. It sounded thick, heavy. "Natalie is a good girl. She just needs to feel heard. We let her make a little noise. We give her a check for $5,000, and she goes back to dance." "She better," Logan's voice cut in, sharp and jittery. "Because if she holds up this transfer, Dad, we are screwed. The balloon payment is due on the 1st. "Keep your voice down," Dad hissed. "We are celebrating. Remember, you are the heir. Act like it." "I am the heir," Logan repeated, sounding like he was trying to convince himself. "It is mine. It is all mine." I stood in the darkness, the humidity clinging to my skin. I gripped the handle of the suitcase. They were telling themselves a fairy tale. They were writing a story where I was the minor character, the obstacle to be paid off, the good girl who would fade away. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. I walked around to the front door. I didn't knock. I turned the handle. It was unlocked. I stepped into the foyer. The conversation in the living room was loud. Uncle Jerry was telling a joke. My mother was laughing. I took a deep breath. I smoothed my blazer. I checked the lock on the suitcase one last time. I wasn't here to join the party. I was here to turn on the lights. The atmosphere inside the Mercer house was not one of mourning. It was one of acquisition. I stepped through the front door and into a wall of noise and conditioned air. The hallway was crowded with people cousins I had not seen in 5 years. Business associates of my father who smelled of expensive cologne and cigars, and neighbors who had come for the free alcohol. Above the archway leading to the living room, someone had hung a banner. It was professionally printed, glossy, and tasteless. It read, "Mercer Family Legacy, a New Chapter." I almost laughed. They had not even waited for the grass to grow on Grandma's grave before rebranding the dynasty. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. That was the benefit of being the easy child, the one who lived in Washington and missed the Easter brunches. I was recognizable enough to be let in, but insignificant enough to be ignored. No one asked me how my drive was. No one asked me where I was staying. They just nodded at me and turned back to their conversations, their eyes sliding right past me to find someone more important. "Natalie, good to see you made it," Uncle Jerry boomed, holding a scotch and soda. He didn't wait for a response. He just gestured toward the center of the room with his glass. "Big night for your brother. Big night." "Huge," I said. He didn't hear the sarcasm. He was already turning away to laugh at a joke someone else made. I made my way to the edge of the living room. Gripping the handle of my black suitcase, I found a spot near the heavy velvet curtains, a vantage point that offered a clear view of the stage they had set. And it was a stage. The furniture had been rearranged. The coffee table where I had placed the initial documents weeks ago had been cleared. In its place, my father's high-backed leather chair had been positioned near the fireplace, but it was empty. Logan was standing next to it. My brother looked every inch the young tycoon. He was wearing a navy suit that was tailored a little too tightly, the kind that screams money rather than whispering it. He held a crystal tumbler in one hand and was gesturing expansively with the other. Holding court with a group of local real estate brokers and 2 of my aunts, I listened to the performance. "It has been a grueling 18 months, Logan was saying, his face composed into a mask of humble martyrdom. Running 8 properties is not just about collecting checks. It is about the late nights. It is about driving out to Folly Beach at 2 a.m. because a tenant has a crisis. It is a burden, honestly, but someone has to carry it. You are a saint, Logan," Aunt Carol cooed, touching his arm. "Your father is so lucky to have you. Most young men would have just walked away." "I could never walk away," Logan said, bowing his head slightly. "This is family. Sacrifice is just part of the job description." I felt a cold, sharp laugh bubbling in my chest. Sacrifice. He called embezzlement sacrifice. He called stealing $60,000 from a grandmother's maintenance fund a burden. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its completeness. He actually believed his own press release. I scanned the room for the other players. My mother was circulating near the kitchen, directing the catering staff with the precision of a drill sergeant. She looked brittle. Her smile was bright, but her eyes were darting around the room, checking the exits, checking the mood, checking for cracks in the facade. Then her eyes found me. She froze mid-gesture. She held a tray of stuffed mushrooms, but for a second, she looked like she was holding a grenade. She stared at me, and then her gaze dropped to the suitcase at my side. I saw the relief wash over her face. She misinterpreted the luggage. She thought I had just arrived from D.C. with my clothes. She thought the suitcase meant I was staying. She thought I had come to sign the waiver and rejoin the fold. She gave me a look that specific, pleading, steely mother look that said, "Do not make a scene. Do not ruin this. Be a good girl." I offered her a small, tight smile. It was the same smile I used when a vendor tried to lie to me about a delivery date. "Sure, whatever you say." She relaxed. She turned back to the caterer, confident that the crisis was averted. I looked for my father. Harold Mercer was standing near the fireplace, but he wasn't part of Logan's circle of admirers. He was standing slightly apart, swirling the ice in his glass. He looked older than he had a week ago. His shoulders were slumped, and there was a gray cast to his skin that spoke of sleepless nights. He knew. He knew about the loan. He knew about the collateral. He knew that this party wasn't a celebration. It was a desperate attempt to solidify Logan's claim on the assets before the bank came knocking. He was betting everything on this night. He felt my eyes on him. He looked up. For a moment, our gazes locked across the crowded room. I waited for him to smile, to wave, to come over and hug his daughter. He didn't. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and shame, and then he looked down at his shoes. He turned his back to me, pretending to examine the mantel. That was the moment the last thread of hesitation snapped. If he had walked over, if he had shown even a flicker of parental instinct over self-preservation, I might have felt sorry for him, but he turned his back. He chose the lie. "Well," I whispered to myself, "choice made." I shifted my attention to the sidebar against the far wall. It was set up like a signing table at a book launch. There was a stack of heavy cream-colored paper. I drifted closer, pretending to admire the floral arrangement. I read the document on top. It wasn't the waiver I had refused to sign. It was something more ceremonial, the Mercer family consensus of asset management. It was a petition. It was a document designed to be signed by every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the room, stating that they acknowledged Logan Mercer as the sole steward of the family estate. It had no legal standing in a court of law compared to a deed, but socially, it was a fortress. If everyone signed this, and then I tried to sue, I would look like the bitter outcast fighting the unanimous will of the clan. It was a smart move. It smelled of Grant Holloway. Speaking of the devil, the family attorney materialized at my elbow. "Natalie," Grant Holloway beamed, his face flushed with wine. He was wearing a tie with sailboats on it. "I'm so glad you could make it. Your father was worried you might not drive down." "I wouldn't miss it, Grant," I said. "It seems like a historic night." It is, Grant agreed, rocking back on his heels. "It is good to get these things settled. Clarity is good for everyone. And between you and me, Logan has really stepped up. He is ready." "He certainly seems ready," I said, glancing at my brother, who was now laughing loudly at his own joke. "And you," Grant lowered his voice, leaning in conspiratorially, "you are okay with the arrangement? The settlement offer is very generous. Natalie, $5,000 just to sign a piece of paper, that is easy money." "I am here to settle everything, Grant," I said ambiguously. "Excellent." He patted my shoulder. "Excellent. No heavy lifting for you tonight. Just enjoy the champagne." He wandered off to refill his glass. He was celebrating a victory he hadn't won yet. He was the captain of the Titanic toasting the iceberg. I pulled my suitcase closer to the beige sofa near the center of the room. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just parked it there. A black monolith in a room full of pastels. It stood out. It was ugly. It was real. I leaned against the wall and waited. I felt a pair of eyes on me from the hallway. I looked over. Standing in the shadow of the doorframe, half hidden by a large potted fern, was Ethan. My cousin looked exactly as he had described himself in the text unnoticed. He was holding a soda, wearing a shirt that was slightly wrinkled. He wasn't mingling. He was watching. He caught my eye. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just nodded. A tiny, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. Then he looked at Logan, then back at me. His eyes said, "I know. I am watching. Do it." It was the only alliance I needed. The noise in the room began to change. It shifted from the chaotic buzz of conversation to a hush. The air grew expectant. Logan stepped away from his group. He walked to the center of the Persian rug. He didn't need a microphone. His ego projected his voice well enough. He tapped a spoon against his crystal glass. Ding, ding, ding. The sound cut through the room. The laughter died down. Faces turned toward him. My mother beamed, clasping her hands together. My father turned around from the fireplace, straightening his tie, composing his face into the proud patriarch. "Family," Logan began. He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch. "Friends, thank you all for coming tonight," he smiled, a wide, winning smile that showed all his teeth. "We have had a hard year," he continued. "Losing Grandma was a blow to the foundation of this house. She was the start of everything. But a house cannot stand without pillars, and tonight we are here to ensure that the roof stays up." Murmurs of agreement. "Here, here," Uncle Jerry whispered. My father. Logan gestured to Dad. "Has carried this family on his back for 40 years, but he deserves to rest. He deserves to sit back and watch the sunset, and that is why, with his blessing, and with the support of everyone here, I am humbly stepping forward to take full ownership and management of the Folly Beach and Isle of Palms portfolio." Applause broke out. It was polite, rhythmic. Wait, Logan laughed, holding up his hands. "I am not done. I have big plans. We are going to modernize. We are going to expand. We are going to take what Grandma built and turn it into an empire. And I want you all to know, I do not take this lightly. I take this as a sacred trust." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the key players. He looked at Grant Holloway, who gave him a thumbs up. He looked at Mom, who was weeping softly. He looked at Dad, who nodded stiffly. Then he looked at me. His eyes lingered for a second. There was triumph in them. He thought he had beaten me. He thought my presence in the corner, silent and still, was my capitulation. "So," Logan raised his glass high, "if everyone could please grab a glass, I would like to propose a toast to the future, to the Mercer legacy, and to the next chapter. Under new management." The room inhaled, ready to cheer. It was time. I didn't speak. I didn't shout. "Objection," like they do in the movies. I simply reached down, grabbed the handle of my suitcase, and pulled. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The sound of the hard plastic wheels rolling over the transition strip between the carpet and the hardwood floor was incredibly loud in the silent room. It sounded like a growl. I walked into the center of the room. I didn't look at the guests. I looked straight at Logan. The applause died before it could fully start. The room went confused, then quiet. Logan lowered his glass a few inches. "Natalie, what are you doing?" "We are toasting." "I know," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "I just wanted to make sure we were toasting to the right thing." "We are toasting the transfer," Logan said, his smile tightening at the edges. "Sit down. Nat, we can talk later." "We cannot talk later," I said, "because later you might try to sell another house you do not own." The whisper went through the room like a breeze. "Sell, own, Natalie." My mother stepped forward, her voice hissing. "Stop this immediately. You are embarrassing the family." "I am not the one embarrassing the family." "Mom," I said. I stopped in the middle of the rug, directly between Logan and the table with the signature sheets. I was the obstacle. I was the glitch in the software. I turned the suitcase so it faced the audience. You mentioned a sacred trust. Logan, I said, looking him in the eye. That is a funny choice of words. Dad, Logan looked at our father, panic flickering in his eyes for the first time. Get her out of here. My father took a step forward. Natalie, that is enough. Go to your room. I don't have a room here. Dad, I said, I live in Washington. Remember, I am the one who is too busy to care. I reached for the latches of the suitcase. Click, the sound echoed. But I made some time, I said. I made time to do a little reading and a little math. I flipped the lid open. The 3 binders, red, blue, and black, sat there, thick and accusatory. Logan, I said, resting my hand on the blue binder. Before you finish that toast, I think there is something you forgot to tell everyone about the ownership of those 8 houses. Logan went pale. He didn't know what was in the box, but he knew the look on my face. It was the look of the auditor who just found the second set of books. Security, Logan yelled. Though we didn't have security, we just had Uncle Jerry. Get her out. Nobody touches me, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was made of iron. Unless you want me to call the police and show them the black binder first. The word police froze everyone. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Dad, I said, turning to my father, who looked like he was about to faint. Don't you know? The room was absolute vacuum. Know what? Logan demanded, his voice cracking. I didn't answer him. I looked at Grant Holloway, who had lowered his glass and was staring at the binders with the professional horror of a lawyer who realizes he has been outmaneuvered. Grant, I said, why don't you come over here? I have some documents that need your professional eye. I think you will find the dates enlightening. I pulled the blue binder out and dropped it on the coffee table. Thump. The sound was heavier than a gavel. The coronation is cancelled, I said. Welcome to the audit. I opened the blue binder. I did not fling the papers into the air like they do in movies. That is for drama. And this was not drama. This was administration. I took the documents out one by one, laying them onto the coffee table with deliberate, rhythmic precision. Snap. The sound of the binder ring opening. Swish. The sound of paper sliding against paper. Thump. The sound of the deed hitting the wood. 1, I counted softly. 104 Palmetto Boulevard. 2, the Folly Beach duplex. 3, 309, Ocean Drive. I laid them out in a perfect grid. 8 document sets covering the glossy surface of the table where, just moments ago, Logan had planned to sign his coronation papers. The header on each document was bold and unmistakable. Quitclaim deed. My father shot up from his chair. The movement was so abrupt that he knocked his scotch glass over. The ice cubes skittered across the floor, spinning in little puddles of amber liquid. But no one looked at them. Natalie, Dad barked. It was his command voice, the one he used to order waiters and subordinates. I am ordering you to stop this right now. You are ruining your brother's night with these props. He stepped toward me, his hand raised as if to snatch the papers away. I wouldn't touch those, Harold, I said, not even looking up as I placed the 5th deed down. Unless you want to be on record tampering with federal mail and recorded county instruments. They are not instruments, Dad shouted. Though his voice cracked at the high end, he was losing his composure. They are fake. You printed them off the internet. Grant, I said, stepping back and gesturing to the table with an open palm. You are a licensed attorney in the state of South Carolina. You are an officer of the court. Why don't you tell the room what we are looking at? Grant Holloway looked like a man who wished he could dissolve into the carpet. He looked at my father, then at Logan, and finally, reluctantly. He leaned over the table. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He reached out a trembling hand and picked up the deed for the Isle of Palms house. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen 3 rooms away. 50 people were holding their breath. Grant's eyes scanned the top of the page. He flipped to the back page. He ran his thumb over the embossed seal of the notary. He looked at the file stamp from the county clerk's office in the top right corner. He put the paper down. He picked up the next one. Then the trust agreement. He stood there for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. "Grant," Logan asked, his voice high and thin. "Tell her it is garbage. Tell her to get out." Grant Holloway took a deep breath. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked up, the festive flush was gone from his cheeks, replaced by a pallor that matched the cream walls. "It is not garbage," Grant said quietly. "Speak up," Uncle Jerry yelled from the back. "It is not garbage," Grant said, his voice snapping with the irritation of a man realizing he has been played. He looked at my father. "Harold, these are real. These are recorded deeds." "That is impossible," Dad whispered. "The title is in Martha's name. It goes to probate." "Not anymore," Grant said. He picked up the thick blue document, the trust agreement. According to this, Martha Rowan established an irrevocable living trust. The date of formation was she actually set the structure up 2 years ago, but it remained unfunded. He flipped the page. "But these deeds," Grant continued, his voice echoing in the silence, "these deeds transfer all 8 properties into the trust. They were signed, notarized, and recorded with the county prior to her death. The properties never entered the estate. Harold, they bypassed the will entirely." "So who owns them?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "Who controls the trust? Is it me?" Grant looked at me. There was a grudging respect in his eyes now, the way a boxer looks at the opponent who just landed a knockout punch he didn't see coming. "No, Diane," Grant said. "The trust appoints a successor trustee with absolute authority over the assets." He read from the page. "Natalie Fox." The name hung in the air like smoke. Logan lunged. It was a desperate, animalistic movement. He grabbed the deed for the Folly Beach house off the table and crumpled it in his fist. "Liar!" he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "It is fake. She forged it. She went into Grandma's house and forced her to sign it. Grandma was senile. She didn't know what she was doing." He threw the crumpled paper at me. It bounced harmlessly off my blazer. "It is a forgery!" Logan yelled, looking around the room for support. "She is a jealous, bitter little bitch who couldn't handle that I was the favorite. Arrest her. Someone call the cops." I didn't flinch. I didn't yell back. I just stood there, watching him unravel. "Grant," I said calmly, "explain the concept of a recorded instrument to my brother." Grant sighed. He looked at Logan with pity. "Logan, you cannot forge a recording stamp. These have book and page numbers from the Register of Deeds. They are in the county system. And the notary seal that is a state-commissioned officer. If you try to challenge this in court claiming forgery, you will need proof. And looking at these, the paperwork is flawless." "I don't care about the paperwork," Logan roared. "Grandma would never do this to me. She loved me. She knew I was the one who took care of her." "Did you—" The voice came from the hallway. It wasn't loud, but it cut through Logan's screaming like a razor. We all turned. Ethan stepped out from behind the fern. My cousin walked into the room. He had always been the invisible kid, the one who sat at the kids' table even when he was 20. But he didn't look like a kid now. He looked like a witness. "Ethan," Mom asked, blinking. Ethan walked past the crowd and stood next to me. He didn't look at Dad. He looked straight at Logan. "I drove her," Ethan said. "You what?" Logan snarled. "I drove Grandma to the notary," Ethan said. His voice was steady, monotone. "She called me on Friday morning. She said she needed a ride, and that I wasn't to tell anyone. Especially not you." "You? You traitor?" Logan hissed. "You helped her steal my inheritance." "She was clear as a bell." "Logan," Ethan said. "She wasn't senile. We stopped for coffee afterward. She told me exactly what she was doing. She said she had to protect the houses from the parasites. That was the word she used." Ethan paused, then looked at Dad. "And she said she hoped Natalie would understand why she had to wait so long." My father made a sound like a balloon losing air. He missed the arm of his chair and sat down heavily on the floor, his legs giving out beneath him. He sat there on the expensive Persian rug, surrounded by the shoes of his guests, looking small and broken. Mom covered her mouth with both hands, a sob escaping through her fingers. She looked from Dad to Logan to me, realizing that the narrative she had constructed for 30 years, the happy family, the golden son, the dutiful daughter, had just been incinerated. Logan was shaking. He looked at the deeds on the table, then at the silent crowd. He realized the audience wasn't clapping anymore. They were judging. "This doesn't count," Logan stammered, backing away. "I have rights. I have possession. I have been managing them." "You have been looting them," I corrected. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer. "And if you think this is over, Logan, you are wrong. This was just the opener." I pulled out the white envelope, the one Grandma had given me in the kitchen, the one with the seal still unbroken. I held it up so everyone could see the handwriting on the front, to be opened only when Logan claims he owns it all. "Grandma left one last instruction," I said. "She told me not to open this unless you tried to take everything, unless you stood in front of this family and claimed you were the rightful owner." I looked at him. "You just did that." "Don't," Dad whispered from the floor. "Natalie, please, don't open it." I looked down at my father. "You know what is in here, don't you, Dad?" He didn't answer. He just put his head in his hands. I turned back to the room. I ripped the seal. Rip. The sound was final. I pulled out the single sheet of yellowed legal pad paper. "This isn't a legal document," I said to the room. "This is a letter, and I think it is time we all heard the story Grandma wanted to tell." I unfolded the paper. "Dad?" I asked, my eyes scanning the first line of the letter, my heart turning to ice as I read the words. "Don't you know?" I handed the yellowed page to Grant Holloway. My hand was steady, but his was shaking as he took it. The room was so quiet that the rustle of the paper sounded like a landslide. "Read it, Grant," I said. "Read it so everyone understands why we are really here." Grant adjusted his glasses. He cleared his throat, but the sound was weak. He looked at the handwriting, Grandma's distinct, sharp cursive, and then he began to read aloud. "My dearest Natalie," Grant read, his voice projecting into the stunned silence. "If you are reading this, it means my worst fears have come to pass. It means Logan has tried to take what he did not earn. But you must know the truth. I did not create this trust solely because Logan was stealing from the maintenance fund, though I knew about the $60,000 he took." A gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Carol put a hand to her chest. Grant continued, reading faster now, as if he wanted to get the poison out of his system. "I created this trust because when I showed your father the evidence of the theft, when I showed him the fake invoices and the missing deposits, he did not get angry. He begged me to look away. He told me, 'Let Logan have it all. Mom, just let him have the title so the family stays quiet. Natalie is strong. She does not need the help. Logan needs the win.' That was the moment I knew. Natalie, I knew that your father would sacrifice justice to keep the peace. And I decided that day to give the power to the only person in this family who understands that peace without justice is just a lie." Grant lowered the paper. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a reputation dying in real time. I looked at my father. He was still on the floor, his head bowed, staring at the intricate patterns of the rug as if they held the answer to a riddle he couldn't solve. "Dad," I said softly. He didn't look up. "Dad," I repeated, my voice slightly louder, cutting through the thick air. "Don't you know?" He flinched. "You knew," I said, answering for him. "You knew he was stealing from her. You knew he was bleeding the accounts dry. And instead of stopping him, you asked Grandma to reward him with the deed. You asked her to cut me out because you thought I was too strong to care. You thought I would just take it." I pointed to the letter in Grant's hand. "You picked a side, Dad, and you picked the wrong one." "Give me that!" Logan screamed. The paralysis broke. Logan launched himself across the gap between us. His face twisted into a mask of pure, desperate rage. He wasn't reaching for me. He was reaching for the letter, for the proof of his inadequacy. "It is a lie!" Logan shrieked, his fingers clawing at the air. But he didn't reach the paper. Grant Holloway, a man who had spent 30 years avoiding conflict, stepped in front of him. He put a hand on Logan's chest and shoved him back. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a hard, decisive block. "Stand down, Logan," Grant barked. "There are 50 witnesses in this room. Do not add assault to your list of problems." Logan stumbled back, breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He looked at the guests. They were recoiling from him. The adoring audience had turned into a jury. "You cannot do this," Logan panted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I am the manager. I have rights. I will sue you. I will tie this up in court for 10 years. You will never see a dime." I smiled. It was the moment I had been waiting for. It was the trap snapping shut. "I am glad you said that," I said calmly, "because you just triggered Clause 15. "Clause what?" Logan sneered. I picked up the blue binder, the trust agreement, and flipped to the back page. I didn't need to read it. I had memorized it, but I wanted him to see the text. "The no contest and forfeiture clause," I said. "Grandma was very specific. She knew you would scream. She knew you would threaten litigation, so she added a provision. It states that if any beneficiary attempts to challenge the validity of the trust, or threatens the trustee, or impedes the transfer of assets in any way, their potential interest in the estate is immediately revoked." I looked at him. "And here's the best part, Logan. There was a backup provision. If you had accepted this gracefully, the trust allowed for a small monthly stipend to be paid to you for 2 years, a safety net. But the clause says that if you exhibit hostile intent toward the trustee, that stipend is automatically canceled and the funds are diverted to the Charleston Animal Society." Logan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You just screamed that you would sue me in front of 50 people, I said. "You just tried to physically attack the family attorney. That is hostile intent. You just cost yourself the only allowance you were ever going to get." "No," Logan whispered. "No, you can't." "It is done," I said. "You did it to yourself." I wasn't finished. I reached into the suitcase one last time. I pulled out the black binder. The thick one. The one with the spreadsheet I had built in the middle of the night in D.C. "And just so we are clear on why you are never touching these properties again," I said, dropping the black binder onto the coffee table next to the deeds. Thump. "This contains the forensic accounting of the last 18 months, I announced to the room. "It details every fake invoice from Marshside, Reno. It details the traces on the checks, and it details the loan payments made to a private lender in North Charleston." I looked at Grant. "Grant, you might want to advise your client," I said, "because I found the loan documents, $200,000 secured by assets he didn't own, with a guarantor signature that looks suspiciously like a forgery of my father's hand." Grant Holloway paled. He looked at the black binder as if it were radioactive. "Logan," Grant said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper, "if this is true, if you leveraged property that wasn't yours, that is mortgage fraud. That is a federal crime." "I didn't," Logan cried, but his voice was thin, reeking of guilt. "It was a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back." "With what?" I asked. "With the rent money you stole." I turned to the crowd. I saw my aunts and uncles staring at Logan with horror. They weren't looking at a successful businessman anymore. They were looking at a liability. "As of this morning," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "I have executed my authority as successor trustee. I have signed a contract with Seabrook Property Management." A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew Seabrook. They were the gold standard. "Their team is at the properties right now." I checked my watch. "Actually, they finished 10 minutes ago. The locks have been changed on all 8 houses. The tenants have been notified that rent payments are to be redirected to the new trust account. Logan's access codes have been deleted." I looked at my brother. "You are locked out. Logan, you have no keys. You have no authority, and you have no income." Logan collapsed onto the sofa. He didn't sit. He fell. burying his face in his hands. The king of the castle looked like a child who had broken a vase. My mother finally moved. She walked over to Dad, who was still sitting on the floor, and put a hand on his shoulder. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but they were also filled with that old, desperate need to smooth things over. "Natalie," she choked out, "please, he is your brother. We are family. You cannot just take everything. Where will he go? What will he do about the loan?" "That is not my problem. Mom," I said. "How can you be so cold?" She wept. "We raised you. We gave you everything." "You gave me a roof," I said. "But you gave him the world, and look what he did with it." I looked at the room one last time. The banner reading Mercer Family Legacy hung above us, mocking the scene. "I am not taking anything from anyone," I said, my voice steady. "I am simply accepting what Grandma placed in my hands. I am protecting the house because the people who were supposed to protect it decided to burn it down for insurance money." I reached down and closed the lid of the suitcase. The sound of the latches snapping shut was final. Click, click. "The audit is closed," I said. I grabbed the handle. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't wait for a hug. I turned my back on the stunned silence, on the crying mother, on the broken father, and on the brother who had lost everything by trying to take too much. I walked out of the living room. The sound of the wheels rolling across the hardwood floor followed me, a steady rhythmic drumbeat of departure. I walked through the foyer, past the wilting lilies, and out into the night. The air outside was still humid, but it felt clean. It felt like my own. I walked to my car, put the suitcase in the trunk, and got in. I didn't look back at the house. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. Ethan was right. Grandma was right. Paper lives longer than promises, and tonight, the paper had spoken. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a long journey, but justice is always worth the wait. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet room like Natalie, or are you on a drive of your own? Please let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories, and if you enjoyed this takedown, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people who need a little reminder that silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. See you in the next story.